Buenas, Hafide, and good afternoon, and welcome to the People's House, the Guam Congress Hall, for this public hearing conducted by the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts. And this hearing is hereby called to order at 2:10 Chamorro Standard Time. Notice of the hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets on Tuesday, July 16, 2024, with the second notice provided on Monday, July 22nd, 2024. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website and on the Government of Guam's public notices portal. This afternoon, the committee will hear testimony on the following bills. Bill number 250-37LS, an act to add a new Chapter 94, Title 9, Guam Code Annotated, relative to establishing and codifying a multi-agency unified law enforcement group known in this act as MAULEG, for the purposes of suppressing the importation, distribution, and selling of narcotics and illicit drugs on Guam, introduced by Senator Dueñas and co-sponsored by myself, Senator Chris Barnett, Senator Frank Blas Jr., Senator Tom Fisher, Senator Dwayne Nicolas, and Senator Jesse Lujan. The committee will also hear testimony on Bill number 281-37LS, which I introduced, and that's an act to add a new Article 5 to Chapter 77, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to officer retention incentives for the Guam Police Department. And finally, the committee will hear testimony on Bill number 293-37 COR, introduced by Senator Telo Taitague, Senator Joanne Brown, myself, and Senators Frank Blas Jr., Joseph Agustin, Chris Dueñas, and Senator Jesse Lujan. It's an act to add a new Section 58.61 to Chapter 58 of Title 9 of the Guam Code Annotated, relative to the use of alcohol and controlled substances within detention and correctional facilities. I would now like to welcome my colleagues joining us today. To my right, the Vice Chair of the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts, Senator Chris Dueñas. And on my far left, Senator Telo Taitague. Thank you. Before we begin, I'd like to again go over the general rules of conduct. Individuals testifying shall first be recognized by the chair before speaking and shall state their name for record-keeping purposes. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the agenda. Personal inference as to the character or motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. The chairperson of the committee may order the removal from a hearing any member of the legislature in Guam who fails to observe proper decorum pursuant to the 37th Guam Legislature's standing rules. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in the removal from the hearing by the host. We'll now proceed with hearing testimony on Bill number 250-37LS. We'll begin by allowing the primary sponsor to open on the bill. Senator Chris Dueñas.
Mr. Chairman, and once again, thank you for your co-sponsorship as well on this bill. And thank you to the members of the law enforcement entities that have come today to testify on behalf of this bill, hopefully in favor. Mr. Chairman and members and folks and those that are looking out in the listening public and watching this hearing, this bill was introduced obviously, and the intent kind of spells it out because of the absolute epidemic that Guam is facing with regard to methamphetamine and now, of course, opioids, to include fentanyl, distribution, use, and just the scourges that come along with it. And it's not a perfect bill, and I know there's several amendments that are going to be proposed, and I'm very happy with that. But it's a starting place. It's a starting place to put, as we like to say here a lot of times, more tools in the toolbox to try to be able to combat the issues we face in our community with regard to crime related to the epidemic, as well as just the overall safety, and also the attempt to basically try to mitigate importation and distribution as well. So I don't want to belabor the points. I just want to go over what I call the four corners of the bill. First of all, the bill states, and I think the chief might be still okay with these numbers, but we'll hear. The bill states that in our jurisdiction on Guam, for our size and population, we should have a manpower, officers on the street, officers on the beat at approximately 520. That may have changed over the years. I know this is the number that we researched. This bill codifies the fact that the people of Guam should have an expectation of a minimum manpower requirement of 70%. That, when you do the math, will equate to about 364 officers on the beat, officers on the street. This is, not counting the administrative staff and all the other things that the Guam Police Department in particular needs to be able to carry out its mandate. And so I believe even with great efforts by the chief and post-commission and everyone in this room to try to get our manpower numbers up, we're probably somewhere around 280 right now, from what I heard from the latest count, which would put us 100 officers almost under what this bill would codify. And so that's the goal, is to say that the people of Guam are entitled to a safety level of this manpower requirement to provide protection for our community and overall ability for law enforcement on the streets. The second thing that this bill does basically, and I think this is an improvement over other efforts in the past to kind of do the same thing, and that is it puts in a command structure that's essentially co-chaired. Of course, we can never take away the governor's powers, because the governor's the governor. The governor has the duty of law enforcement and public safety of Guam, right? So that's, we even, restated in this bill, but that's an understood issue. With the chief of police, of course, chief is the chief. Chief has that designating authority to be able to do what MAULEG asks it to do. But we thought that it would be more effective to make sure the command structure includes elements that we believe add to accountability as well as cross-checking and checks and balances. So we issued the fact that the co-chair would be the post-commission, essentially, because the post-commission, as we know, is charged with training, duties and responsibilities, establishing, all of the sort of effects of having and including dealing with the law enforcement needs. And that's what, the primary mission. I know the director's here, so he'll elaborate on that, I'm sure. And so the co-chair there really is once again, and then of course we put in as well the Fusion Center. And the reason why we wanted to ensure that the Fusion Center is also a part of this is because the Fusion Center, of course, on Guam is designed to collaborate between all law enforcement entities, federal and local. And so now you really have that also, once again, strong federal component as a co-chair, ensuring that the carrying out of the duties and responsibilities of MAULEG has the eyes and ears of really the whole full array of public safety. And that includes the military too, because of course our armed forces are part of as well and have activities alongside the Fusion Center. So we believe this structure has established a very, very good way of carrying out what MAULEG purports to do and wants to do. So the third component that I think is really important is the fact that that minimum manpower requirement is what triggers MAULEG. MAULEG is not designed, the Multi-Agency Unified Law Enforcement Group is not designed to have to function at all times. Probably would be good to still have quarterly meetings when we meet our requirement for minimum manpower requirements. But the trigger is that number, and what the trigger does is allows the chief of police and the co-chairs to come together and map out a plan with some structures that are included in here to augment law enforcement, to be able to have a more coordinated plan to use other entities such as airport police, port police, even DOC, even DYA, even other entities that basically have a law enforcement component. Now we know that there's restrictions, we know that there's federal restrictions in terms of how that activity goes down, but we also know that there's many opportunities to collaborate and to utilize manpower that's not necessarily just in policing, but in more eyes and ears in the community and more ability to marshal resources together. The other thing that I think is key to this bill is the fact that there is also a deputization and a community element to it, to where we envision that probably it would be retired police officers, retired law enforcement officers, maybe even in those in corrections and the like, taking on the responsibility of being deputized within the community to be additional eyes and ears and working directly under MAULEG to be able to do some additional surveillance and opportunities to make our communities, particularly at the village level, safer. Finally, I think, what essentially, I'd like to compliment the administration as well as the chief and others that have worked tirelessly also on trying to accomplish this goal. We have examples of it really at this point in time. I think the Parks and Rec right now is doing an excellent job in terms of standing up their law enforcement capabilities that was so depleted for the longest time. We hear from the chief and we hear from other entities that there's a lot of reports coming in now of activities in the parks that have greatly improved our parks and, you know, kind of eradicated a certain amount of drug activity and other illegal activity in those areas. And that's simply by giving them the manpower, the resources, and we know that they have former officers now that were GPD officers that are paroling and doing this activity. The other thing is I want to congratulate the Guam Visitors Bureau because they actually, in response to, of course, a terrible incident in Tumon, have greatly stepped up their efforts in terms of their surveillance, not only electronically, but with manpower as well, as we sometimes call them the yellow shirts, but I understand they're also having individuals that are, you know, not identified, not marked, that are watching things going on in Tumon and around the island. So I think the truth is that there's already been some mini MAULEGs that have been put together, and I want to thank the administration and all the law enforcement entities for trying the best with the resources that they have. And I look forward to the testimony. Like I said, I look forward to amendments. It's not a perfect bill, but I guess in closing at this portion, Mr. Chair, I've had some comments from some folks, well, if they're doing it already, why is this necessary? The thing is that a lot of things we do, particularly at the administration level, many of us know, having worked in administrations, executive orders are great, and they carry out really a lot of the full function of law, but they're not law. And so when a law is a law, and you got a trigger mechanism like falling below 70% and saying, guys, what do we do now? Let's come together and let's step this up and let's use every resource we have to help our community. That's a law. That's not contingent upon whether or not there's an appetite for it or whether or not it's considered to be a useful tool. It's a law, and so we all try to abide by our laws and do things that will help. And so that's the reason why I believe this is an important piece of legislation. And hopefully with the testimony today that will come forward, we'll see that as well. And hopefully we'll make improvements on the bill as well going forward. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to open on this bill.
Vice Chair Senator Dueñas. I just wanted to take this opportunity to read into the record the fiscal note that was provided by BBMR. And it reads, the proposed legislation intends to establish and codify a multi-agency unified law enforcement group known as MAULEG for the purposes of suppressing the importation, distribution, and selling of narcotics and illicit drugs on Guam. Per comments provided by the Guam Police Department, the unbudgeted costs necessary to support the MAULEG program is estimated at approximately $530,662 per annum. This will consist of administrative personnel costs at $120,000 for the recruitment of 2 administrative assistants, administrative staff overtime costs for preparation and attending meetings held after regular working hours, stipends for the deputization of 20 civilians, and training supplies, as well as equipment to include computers, software, official vehicles. Further, it's assumed that the Office of Technology will be the government entity to establish and administer the program's website as stipulated in the proposed legislation to post public notices, information, and other criteria for public search and awareness as the Guam Police Department lacks the sufficient manpower to assume this role. And we'll now go to our testimony, starting with the Chief of the Guam Police Department, Chief Steve Ignacio. Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon, Senators. Havade, and good afternoon, everyone. Senators Dueñas, Barnett, and Taitague. I am Stephen C. Ignacio, Chief of the Guam Police Department, and I'm here to provide written testimony in support of Bill 250-37LS. Buenas noches. As the Chief of Police for the Guam Police Department, I am writing to express our support for the intent of Bill number 250-37LS, also known as the MAULEG Bill, to provide a mechanism to add capacity to the Guam Police Department when needed. Despite challenges posed by the manpower shortage, this bill aims to enhance and improve strategies for curbing drug activity on Guam. By introducing new measures and optimizing existing resources, this legislation seeks to strengthen law enforcement efforts, increase the efficiency of drug prevention, programs, and augment response to drug-related issues. This approach will assist in the combat of drug and make significant progress in the fight against drug activity. However, we recommend some amendments and are committed to working with the author and the committee to incorporate our suggestions as led by Post-Commission Director John Lozano. We appreciate the sponsor's efforts to expand law enforcement resources. The knowledge of other law enforcement officers is invaluable, but to effectively facilitate arrest and conviction, it is essential that the Chief of Police be authorized to deputize other law enforcement officers. We also caution against law enforcement by committee with the inclusion of non-law enforcement entities, though we acknowledge these entities can be brought in as needed. Recognizing the importance of task forces, we currently have 7 officers participating in several federal task forces, such as the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm and Explosives, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, the U.S. Marshal Service, U.S. Secret Service, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations offices. Some of the recommended amendments to the following lines. Page 4, lines 8 to 12, subsection 94-102. We ask that the language in this section be replaced with an appropriation. We strongly prefer that local funds be appropriated for the group's work rather than pursuing grants funding. Otherwise, the individual agencies would be competing for the same grants. Page 4, line 22 to 27, and page 5, line 1 to 26, page 6, 1 to 10, Public Website Creation Establishment Administration. We ask that this section be deleted. The online warrant repository registry already exists and is in operation pursuant to Article 2 of Chapter 20 of Title 8 GCA. Page 7, line 2, subsection 94-106, augmentation of sworn officers. We ask that a new subsection D be added to 94-106 to allow the Guam Police Department Chief to deputize other law enforcement officers. Page 7, lines 3 to 25, subsection 94-107, community collaboration. We strongly advise that this section be reconsidered. Authorizing deputized civilians poses risk to the community and the government. Law enforcement officers undergo extensive and continued education and training. And we can also discuss that about other programs that we have that are kind of similar to the thought behind this section. Page 9, lines 6 through 11, authority and duration. We ask that this section be amended to read, this assignment shall take effect upon GPD having less than 364 uniform officers for shift requirements or at times when needed at the discretion of department or agency heads, MAULEG will be immediately activated and remain in effect until recommended to cease by the chairman and approved by both co-chairmen when the need for augmentation is no longer required. Page 9, line 15 through 16, subsection 94-112, timeline for submission. 31 days is too soon for a report on the group's activities and achievements. We ask that any report not be required for submission in less than 90 days. Page 9, lines 17 to 27, page 10. Line 1, subsection 94-112, content guidelines. The content of the report should be limited to ensure that the effectiveness of the group's work is not undermined. Some of the listed contents could jeopardize investigations. We ask that 3, 4, 6, and 7 be removed. Other contents are already published in public reports, such as the GPD Annual Crime Report. We ask that V be removed. Excuse me. Page 10, line 13 through 17, subsection 94-112D. We ask that this subsection be deleted pursuant to the Organic Act of Guam. The governor has authority over executive branch agencies, and the group would be established under the executive branch. I believe this amendment will clarify the bill's intent and ensure that its enforcement is both fair and effective. And upon consideration, our recommendation is I hereby reiterate my support for passing Bill 250 into law. and respectfully encourage members of the 37th Guam Legislature to do the same. Thank you.
Sudaswasi, Chief Ignacio. Mr. Lozama?
Good Mr. Chairman and members of the Committee of Education, Public Safety, and Arts. My name is John Lozama. I am the Executive Director for the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, the Post Commission. We support the intent of the bill as well to provide the mechanism to add capacity to the Guam Police Department as needed or when needed. And again, we thank the sponsor for trying to facilitate the expansion to meet the needs of our island and to help resolve the issues that we're currently ongoing, the problems that we're currently undergoing. But in order for this task force to work, the Chief of Police needs to be authorized to swear in or deputize other law enforcement officers from the other agencies in order for this task force to work. And we recognize that. We therefore, well, in addition to what the Chief of Police has provided, I offer a couple of other amendments, minor amendments as well. As it relates to Section 94101, membership, Bill 250-37 proposes the membership consists of the following 15 members: Chief of Police, Executive Director, Post Commission, Executive Director, Fusion Center, Director of Public Health, Director of Guam Behavioral Health, Director of CQA, Airport Police Chief, Port Police Chief, Director DOC, Superintendent, Parks and Recreation Patrol, Park Patrol, Director DYA, Homeland Security Advisor, Director, Department of Revenue and Taxation, Director, Department of Agriculture, Executive Director, Mayor's Council of Guam. That's a huge committee. I am recommending that the composition of the task force should only consist of 7 members. Since only 4 law enforcement agencies are designated to provide the sworn officers, maybe we should consider the following memberships: the Chief of Police as the chairman, the Executive Director, the Post Commission as the co-chair, vice chair, Executive Director, the Fusion Center, co-chair, vice chair, Chief of Airport Police, Port Police Chief, Chief of the Division of Aquatic and Wildlife Resources at the Department of Agriculture, the Superintendent of the Park Patrol Division, Department of Parks and Recreation. To note, when you look at the original bill, it talks about the importation. An agency to consider would be the Director of Customs and Quarantine. So it's better for us to reduce this committee to those that are specifically working the task force rather than having law enforcement by committee by including the other non-LE agencies. However, as needed, the chairman, with consultation of the co-chairs, can request for their presence if we see a need. And I would add those amendments to that. To highlight, as stated by the chief, under community collaboration, you know, the Guam Police Department does have the authority under Title 10, GCA Chapter 77 to establish volunteers. And so under this section, the Chief of Police is further authorized to recruit to assist the Guam Police Department with traffic direction, security, and crowd control. This was one of the original comments in the bill. That could be satisfied by way of the existing authority of the Chief of Police to get volunteers. Okay? As it relates to Section 94108, salaries and benefits, obviously based on the fiscal note that was provided by BBMR, that could serve as the baseline for the task force. However, once the task force gets started, there may be additional funding that is needed for equipment, especially for training. It's important that any of the sworn law enforcement officers from the other agencies who are assigned to the Guam Police Department undergo stringent training as well to ensure that there's only one standard that they're following. Just to ensure, because they still have to learn the standard operating procedures of the Guam Police Department. They still have to undergo the general orders of the Guam Police Department. Now, when you're talking about narcotics, there's collection, and all that other stuff that they have to follow. And if they're part of the Guam Police Department, they have to write the reports. So they need to be brought in, and they need to be trained on how to properly do that. And that's to ensure that the Attorney General's office has everything they need in order to proceed. So we need to make sure that they're trained, which is why they need the funding. And although the fiscal note says the 530, I asked the committee to consider increasing that amount. There's a lot of PPE equipment that these officers may need as well. Personal protection equipment, law-related personal protection equipment, rather, that they're gonna need. And of course, there's a situation with vehicles where the Guam Police Department is gonna need vehicles. So I asked that that be included, and then, of course, their salaries and their benefits if they're sworn in as police officers of the Guam Police Department. I've already touched on the training and the supplies. That's part of the fiscal note, but it needs to be indicated in section 94010, which is training and supplies. Then, in conclusion, support the bill to provide a mechanism to add capacity to GPD as needed, when needed. We thank the sponsor again for trying to facilitate the expansion of law enforcement resources, and we hope that our recommendations will be received in good favor. Subject to your questions, this concludes my presentation, my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Lozama. Chief Berdallo?
Good afternoon, Senator Barnett, Senator Dueñas, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Taitague. My name is Fred E. Berdallo, Jr., Director, Department of Corrections. I'm here to submit testimony in support of Bill 250-37, and I have written testimony that I submitted here. Buenas and Hafide, Senator Chris Barnett, Chairman, Committee Education, Public Safety and the Arts, and members of the 37 Guam Legislature. I'm providing this written testimony in response to the above aforementioned proposed Bill 250-37. The threat of importation, distribution, and selling of narcotics, illicit drugs in Guam is a challenge that requires a strategic response in the context of enforcement of our drug laws and with law enforcement operations that disrupt and deter illegal drug importation, distribution activities. As the former officer in charge of the Guam Police Department's Violent Street Crimes Task Force and retired chief of police, I have had the operational strategic planning experience in response to this problem that the proposed legislation offers to adopting strategic initiatives. And that involves law enforcement organizations working together because it provides the chances that suppression of narcotics and illegal drug trafficking activities can be effectively achieved. The Department of Correction, I'm confident, with the dedicated and committed security personnel that have been engaged in the interdiction of illegal contraband in our prison, will be ready to support the goals of this legislation to suppress illegal drug activities and importation of narcotics in Guam. Our newly established Strategic Threat Intelligence Unit, Special Operations Teams, together with our Parole Service Division, will join this fight with sharing of criminal intelligence information with our partners in local and federal law enforcement for effective coordinated drug enforcement. Thank you, and I'll await any questionings.
Cesar Masi, Director Berdallo. The committee did receive testimony from Public Health Acting Director Teresa Arreola. And I'll just read in part here. The Department of Public Health and Social Services is in support of Bill 250-37. The DPHSS Division of Environmental Health is authorized to enforce local and federal laws relative to the misuse and abuse of pharmaceutical controlled substance, as well as the importation, distribution, and sale of misbranded, adulterated, and fraudulent consumer commodities, including drugs. DEH is authorized and mandated to manage the following 3 drug-related programs: the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, which assists healthcare providers and law enforcement from identifying patients that may be misusing or abusing pharmaceutical-controlled drugs through an electronic database and reporting system; the Controlled Substances Program, which registers individuals and institutions who manufacture, distribute, and dispense controlled substances on Guam. CSP also investigates individuals, healthcare providers, and healthcare facilities that divert medicinal controlled drugs for illicit use. And lastly, the Consumer Commodities Program, the CCP, prevents the importation, distribution, and sale of misbranded, adulterated, and fraudulent commodities, including drugs. Currently, DEH is a member of the Opioid Task Force, which is led by the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center to help reduce the misuse of opioids and other illicit drugs on island. The task force includes the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, local law enforcement agencies, and other stakeholders. The purpose and creation of MAULEG complements the mission of the Opioid Task Force and augments the drug-related programs of DEH in preventing drug diversion and protecting the people of Guam. And that's an excerpt from testimony from Public Health Acting Director Teresa Ariola. The committee also received favorable testimony in support of the bill from the Acting Director of Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center, Carissa Pangilinan. She writes here, GBWIC and our mission to provide the inclusive quality behavioral health and substance use services to our island community supports Bill 250-37. GBWIC looks forward to supporting the MAULEG Task Force in meaningful ways while being careful not to compromise patient care and privacy. GBWIC must comply with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, and 42 CFR Part 2, and therefore cannot disclose any information regarding those seeking and or in treatment. And so that was just some of the testimony the committee received, and I'd like to now defer to the main sponsor of the bill for any questions he might have for the panel. Senator Dueñas.
Jesus Masi, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the very favorable testimony and the great suggestions in terms of amendments. And I will work with the committee, and our office will work to incorporate all of these great recommendations. I just wanted to address at the outset that the reason why these non-law enforcement entities were added to this bill is I met with a lot of individuals, including recovered addicts, that wanted to see what this bill was about, because they really have made a suggestion that, you know, a hammer sometimes is not as effective always as, you know, treatment and community-based opportunities. And so when I went through the bill and I did a presentation to well-known recovered addicts that are trying to help other people, they realized that what the bill was actually something that is going to accomplish trying to get, you know, with more enforcement. A lot of times people go to treatment after they have an interdiction with the law. And so they said, could you try to make sure that this bill is balanced and has a treatment component? But I like the suggestion by the Post Commission and others here, the Chief, that what we do is we kind of either make ex officio or make recommendations to the committee to bring these individuals in as needed. Because as you can see, more than likely you're going to have a lot. With this enforcement level, you're going to have a lot more increase of individuals, you know, having that contact with the law, and then probably and hopefully wanting to change their lives and go and seek treatment so that they can, you know, turn their lives around. So that's why that was there. The Mayor's Council of Guam, they always tell us, don't let us be the last to find out if we got additional responsibilities. So I'll talk to the president. Once again, Mayor Jesse Alec recommended that, but I'll let him know that basically the Post Commission and the other leadership is encouraged to call you in as needed in terms of their operations and what they'll be doing to keep you abreast of what's going on, so that you won't get added responsibilities without being part of the overall solution. So I'll contact all of these individuals before we delete them and let them know that that they will still have a role based on as needed, and the committee will call them. Chief, my main question to you, and once again I want to thank you for the several meetings we've had together, as well as the Lieutenant Governor's office, who I had 2 meetings with, and they mentioned that the recommendations that most of you will be putting forward would be coming because their legal counsel has reviewed this bill quite extensively as well. Chief, are a lot of these recommendations also coming from legal counsel from the Governor's office?
Yes, it's pretty much, we also had meetings within the public safety directors to kind of provide our input. So this is a collaboration of, this is input from GPD command staff, the directors from the different law enforcement or public safety agencies that are identified in MAULEG, and with input as well from the Governor's legal counsel and working with the Governor's policy director.
That's
so
great.
it's all meshed into one.
Yeah, because that's essentially what Rick Yersini was letting me know. And then also I had conversations with the Attorney General, and I think what you've put in here was the only real concern he addressed to me is make sure that there's a clear channel of the deputization and the understanding so that you don't cross any wires in terms of what, when this commission is put together and executing its duties, that it's under the clear direction of the chief, and the deputization is clear so that everything is covered in terms of what the officers that would be dedicated to MAULEG and what they're doing would be. Chief, in the event that MAULEG comes together and say, for example, outside of augmenting your manpower, do you see an opportunity where the MAULEG committee could at least have other law enforcement entities, not necessarily out there to effectuate arrests and do, what do you call that, things like interdicting and going into homes and things like that, but to provide additional surveillance? Is that something you envision that you could at least coordinate through this when you activate MAULEG in terms of additional surveillance?
So, the reason why we recommend deputizing and working under the purview of the Guam Police Department, it's very similar to how we do our task forces.
Okay.
So if Chief Ignacio sends Officer Cruz down to the FBI as a task force officer, what happens actually is the Officer Cruz, goes through a complete background investigation by the FBI. He's vetted and he's make sure that he's the right fit for that agency. There's no factors or in his background that may affect his assignment there. And what happens is that after he's done with all that, he actually carries an FBI badge because he's sworn in as an FBI special agent. So that's what the task force officers do. It's not just go there and work and help them. They actually really fall under the purview of that different task force. They actually enforce federal law as the task force officers. That's why they come in and they actively investigate federal offenses. And that's kind of the concept we envision here, at least for the law enforcement side and the drug interdiction side with regards to law enforcement, is that the local law enforcement comes over to the Guam Police Department. They raise their right hand. We give them a Guam Police badge. You now are hereby a Guam Police Department officer. You have the same jurisdiction as a Guam Police Department officer has. Because currently, and I think that's where some of the issues came up in other task forces, multi-agency task forces, is that the jurisdiction of the officers were questioned. Well, he's a port police officer. He only has arresting authority at the port, or he only has jurisdiction at the port. Why is he searching a house up in Kalamasa Lane, right, with the Guam Police Task Force? So I think those are some of the legal issues that arose out of the previous task forces. And Director Badali reminded me of that we've had many task forces. Yeah. We had Violent Street Crimes Task Force, Criminal Justice Strike Force. I had Community Crimes Task Force. There's probably many others, sure. And I think MAULEG kind of addresses that, that we can always bring it together, take it apart if it doesn't need to exist anymore, and send them back. And so that's my answer to that, is that it'll be a lot easier and more, I think, more legal and lawful if they come over and we train them up to technically be a police officer. And considering that, we generally have the same training because we are under the post commission, it shouldn't take more than probably in-service briefings and trainings, right?
Nice. Thanks, Chief. Yeah, Mr. Zama, I was going to go to you next.
If I may, and just as a reference for the committee in support of the Chief's claim, if you look at Title 8, Chapter 5, Section 5.56, it does state that the peace officers to yield to the Guam Police Department. And that is where we need to ensure that they are sworn in or deputized as police officers with the Guam Police Department, trained up, ready to go, because if a park patrol officer decides to do something, they still have to yield to the Guam Police Department. And we don't want to just start including all these other agencies into the task force without ensuring that they meet the proper training standards and they undergo all the things that are needed to ensure that this task force works. But in the end, if it's just an individual that's not part of this task force, that's not sworn in or deputized, they have to yield to GPD. And that's where we're going to have the problem with the Attorney General's office prosecuting the case.
Right. So, Mr. Zama, do you concur with the chief that because of the disciplines and the training that's pretty close across most law enforcement, you should be able to effectively set up a program to do it where it'd be relatively
Yes, and
easy?
I will work with the chief of police, the training and staff division. We can go over the curriculum, whatever is required. We can ensure that these sworn officers that are deputized meet the standards, the Guam Police Department standards, as well as the post-commission standards.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Lizama. And finally, Fred, I wanted to, because another thing of how sometimes we have programs that don't get codified, right? I'm sure you probably still do this, but when I was at Youth Affairs, we had a standing unwritten order, I would say, that whenever we had a major incident or like an escape at Department of Youth Affairs, we always had the full support of SORT your SORT team to go out and help us to find the young people so that we can protect their safety and deal with that. Or if there's any major incident where maybe some of our youth service workers were overwhelmed, that SORT would come in and assist us. First of all, do you still do that? And second of all, can you see why I'm trying to, lock this down to make sure it's a law?
Yes, Senator Dueñas and our SORT team, Special Operations Response Team, some of their members help out in our intel unit that we established, and then some will be also activated on our, we changed it, it used to be called the Fugitive Apprehension Team, but they didn't want the T because when I call the fat people, so we changed it Fugitive Apprehension Unit. And that's together with our Parole Services Division. They're a key component in this collection of intelligence because they know their parolees, and every time there's some kind of stuff that happens, Guam Police Department needs assistance, both our SORT team and our Parole Division can provide some of the information about some of these parolees that are getting in trouble out there and probably going to be a suspect in some of these illegal drug activities.
Thanks a lot once again, gentlemen, and I look forward to working with the committee and adopting all of your recommendations. And when we are able to do that and we basically have a substitute bill, then we'll recirculate it to the agencies for their review once again, and hopefully we'll have a finished product at some point to be able to present to the floor. But I'll listen to my colleagues as well and see what other questions might come up, and then I might have some follow-up in the end, but that as I close. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Barnett,
Chief?
after the round of questions, I did have some additional comments, just kind of note-taking here, that I wanted to make, just to bring it to the attention of the committee.
Sure. Would you like to just proceed with that?
You want me to proceed? Okay. So again, under 94-106, it mentions that the composition of the task force comprising law enforcement, there's a section there that covers only GIAA, Port Authority, Agriculture, and BPR and GPD. But DOC, Customs, and DYA, I think are kind of missing from the, unless I'm missing it. Yeah, so under 94-106A is this augmentation of sworn officers. So it only incorporates, of course, GPD because of MAULEG, chair, but General Manager of Airport, General Manager of Port, Director of Agriculture, DPR, shall identify sworn police officers from their respective agencies to augment GPD. But I'm not getting augmentation under this section for Customs, DOC, and DYA.
If I may, that's what I previously mentioned, Senator, about the inclusion of Customs and Quarantine into the task force. As mentioned by the chief, the inclusion of the Department of Corrections and DYA as needed upon determination of the chairman and the committee is probably where we'd like to proceed on that as well.
Yeah, I think we were under the impression that on the original section which established the membership, but I agree with you. We'll make that change.
Yeah, that'll be kind of like their way out. I'm not here to augment you, just be in your committee. Here to meet, yeah. Okay, thank you very much, sir. And then 94109, the logistical and equipment. I know that my administrative services officer submitted a fiscal note to BBMR. And, you know, unfortunately, when we're dealing with civilian employees, they kind of see things from their perspective. I think a lot of what she submitted to BBMR as a fiscal note for the MAULEG bill just incorporates the administrative support for like meetings, recordings, and you know, a place. Really, what's missing is the real meat and potatoes, if I would call it that, for the MAULEG task force or commission, and that's cars. You know, I've been brought down here in an oversight hearing because I'm short on cars. So I definitely don't have cars for to support MAULEG. I think every other public safety or law enforcement agency that would come to augment MAULEG, probably in the same predicament as I am. We don't have cars to support the task force, if you will, the augmented sworn law enforcement officers. The second thing is office space. You know, really what I envision here is MAULEG should be separate and apart from any other division, section, unit within the Guam Police Department, so that they have concentrate strictly on what MAULEG is supposed to do, which is drug investigation and drug interdiction. You know, because currently my special investigation and even my task force officers fall under the purview of the Criminal Investigation Division or the Investigations Bureau. So what happens is when there's a homicide or a rash of robberies or whatever, a rash of crimes that need to be investigated, we pull from these drug investigators, hey, we're short, you need to come in and help solve this crime or help us, you know, execute warrants or whatever. And so it takes them away from sometimes their job for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe as short as 2 days. But what happens is it really disrupts the tempo of their cases because they're going down a path. You know, sometimes, you know, when you're doing drug investigations, there's timelines involved. You know, you can't wait 2 weeks later to go execute go apply for a warrant for a house. And so, you know, it kind of disrupts things and they have to start all over again, a drug investigation. So really, I envision MAULEG as something that's separate and apart from any other division, unit, or bureau of the Guam Police Department. And maybe it'll fall directly under the office of the Chief of Police or the Colonel's office or somewhere where they have direct line to a command staff officer, but they're not going to be pulled by any other place so that as not to disrupt their work and so that they can continue with drug interdiction. And so they're going to need office space, they're going to need cars, they're going to need equipment. None of that really is funded. I mean, we're not talking about clothing, you know, I'm sure they all have guns. They're going to come with their guns. But, you know, it's like Post Director Lizama said, training is important. You know, we're starting to ramp up some of our awareness and our training on fentanyl, responding to scenes involving fentanyl because, you know, there are more layers of protection and precaution that have to be taken as opposed to just dealing with a meth case. So that was my comment to that. I talked about training a little. You know, one of the things that I think would be helpful and really successful is having a full-time drug prosecutor. So when I was at Highway Patrol Division, we had a full-time DUI prosecutor. And day in and day out, that's what we work with was that DUI prosecutor on DUI cases. I think it would be helpful if we have either a funded position, maybe through MAULEG, funding can be given for the AG's office to hire a full-time drug prosecutor. Because, you know, if we're just working with attorney A tomorrow, attorney B the next day, attorney C, you know, we're working on the same case, you know, and we're just keep getting passed off. But we have a full-time drug prosecutor. They kind of understand the conspiracy that's going on. And that's how I believe some of the task forces work, especially with the drug cases. You know, they have at least one dedicated attorney down at the U.S. Attorney's Office that does strictly drug cases. And so, you know, this person understands the conspiracy, how the other players have a role in this drug distribution network, whether I'm dealing with somebody at the very top, somebody in the middle, or somebody at the street level. But having a full-time drug prosecutor from the Attorney General's office that can be funded through MAULEG, whatever funding can be given to this commission, so that, you know, we have a full-time drug prosecutor so that when it's time to indict, time to make arrest, you know, we've worked collaboratively throughout the whole entire investigation. And those are some of my comments. Just wanted to add to that discussion.
Thank you, Chief. I guess I just had a question, and I'm not sure if Chief or Mr. Lozama could answer, maybe both, but you had talked about when we deputize officers, when the chief deputizes officers to become, you know, Guam Police Department officers, you mentioned that there might be some additional training that they might have to undertake. So I know one of your recommendations for the bill is kind of whittling down the membership of the MAULEG task force. So I'm just kind of curious, when you made those suggestions, which agencies are going to require kind of like the most additional training to really give them that understanding about, you know, some of the mandates that the Guam Police Department has and some of the authorities and capabilities that they have. Is there really that much of a difference from agency to agency?
No, there's not that much of a difference, but as I mentioned, the standard operating procedures, the general orders of the Guam Police Department, I also discussed like the collection, how to properly collect. There's also the actual police report that they would need to do. I'm not sure if like a DYA, if we're including them, whether or not they've actually gone through that. Some of the other departments may have their own forms, like the Airport Authority, the Port Authority, but the GPD form, the arrest form, all the forms, the supplementals, that get sent up to the Attorney General's office. And in order for it to work, we need to make sure that they are trained up on how to properly use those forms. So again, the general orders, the standard operating procedures, some of the collection process, how do they collect it, how do they store it, how they work with the crime lab, GPD crime lab, and all these things, and the reports. That's what I envision.
Yeah, so to that point, Senator, I think, like I said, because it's the post commission, it's a standardized training, we kind of almost receive the same core curriculum. You know, Post Director Lizama is correct. You know, there's some things that we need to teach them, how to navigate our records management system, because that's where they search databases for cases involving maybe drug offenders. And
thank you for that. So you don't anticipate that there will be, I mean, I'm just trying to work it out in my head. We deputize somebody, how quickly do you think they're able to hit the street and participate in this MAULEG task force? Because I'm only just thinking if we have, you know, for example, someone who is deputized from another agency that maybe isn't as familiar with evidence collecting, I'm just worried that we don't somehow jeopardize the the ability to prosecute cases.
I don't think it'll take more than 4 weeks. As a matter of fact, I think 2 weeks, 2 to 4 weeks should suffice for this in-service type of training.
Right, thank you. And then I know, Director Redalia, you had brought up the involvement of the Attorney General's office. Okay.
Yeah, I did. I was talking about a drug prosecutor.
Drug prosecutor, right.
Yeah.
So the bill as written doesn't include the Attorney General's office, but do you think that a representative from the agency?
I just kind of realized that they're not actually in the composition of the MAULEG. Yeah.
So if I can, Mr. Chairman, actually in my conversation with the current AG, he mentioned that he wouldn't want to and he doesn't want to participate because of the fact that he has that arm of doing the prosecution. And so he recommended that interface is probably, he's on the other side, right? He already works hand in hand, is what he explained to me. He already works hand in hand with you in terms of the, you know, receiving whatever you present for them to gather and formulate cases to be able to go out and prosecute. But I think the link now, as you brought it up, Chief, you know, we can propose a section in here. I think that would be the link then, is to have that dedicated drug crimes prosecutor out of the office, and that's kind of the liaison, the contact, right? But according to the Attorney General, what he wanted to make sure of was that, you know, when he's prosecuting, there's that two separate entities in terms of the law enforcement gathering the evidence, getting the bad guys, doing what they do, for pushing up that report, and then them taking that and formulating their
Right.
their
And that's what I talked about earlier, though, because like even our federal task force officers, they kind of deal with one U.S. attorney, and and then, like I said, when I was at Highway Patrol Division, we had one DOI prosecutor, so we'd always present cases to this one specific person, and we brief them from the onset of the case all the way through to the arrest, so that they know what's going on. I think I believe that it's good to have a drug prosecutor on board this team. Again, because when you're doing a drug investigation, you're probably dealing sometimes with a drug organization, a whole group of people, and so we're pursuing different people at different times, and so it's good for one prosecutor that works closely with MAULEG to say, hey, okay, I know what this involvement of person B is in relation to person C and D and A, right? And so they kind of know, and we start to brief them, hey, we're running surveillance in the house, we're ready, this is what we got. They can help us draft warrants, and get involved. So that was just my thoughts, but of course, the AG has his own department to run, so I'm not gonna kind of run into there and tell him what should be done. Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll go back and meet with them again, because I think on this link, I think he would definitely welcome it, because that then is the situation whereby you have that dedicated prosecutor. So you're really, like you said, on the enforcement, the interdiction, the arm of going out and trying to really crack down. You have that cohesive membership to where that attorney is the one that's constantly, that's their bailiwick, if you will. They're out there to prosecute, so they're going to ensure the tightness of the case and how it's put together in terms of what you're doing in the field. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
I'd like to also recognize colleagues Senator Joanne Brown and Senator Roy Kanata, and now go to Senator Telo Taitague for any questions or comments on the bill or for the panel. Senator Taitague.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to my colleagues, and of course, good afternoon, Chief and Fred and Mr. Lozana. Appreciate you being there, and of course, the support of your men behind you. We always need to recognize them as well, because those are the backbones of those who protect us, and I want to thank you so much for the hard work that you do, keeping Guam safe. You can't have too many of these task force, I mean, we've had quite a bit in the past, and I'm trying to figure out what's the difference between some of the other groups that were together, like, the Guam Police Department's Violent Street Crimes Task Force, or the Federal DEA Task Force, or the U.S. Immigration Custom Enforcement ICE Task Force. These other task forces that have been implemented, if any of these no longer exist, and would this be taking the place of it? And can you give me the difference between these task forces versus this task force? So
when we assign an officer to a federal agency, they usually call them a task force officer. So they're involved in investigating specific crimes. So of course at DA, they investigate drug crimes. Same with Homeland Security. FBI, we had a task force officer that's over there on the criminal side. We at one time had two officers. One was involved in the Marianas Child Exploitation Task Force. And that task force under the FBI was specifically to go after sexual predators within the Pacific region, especially up here in the Micronesian region. So, some of these officers work in these federal agencies, and we call them task force officers because they go down there and they get deputized and they get sworn in as federal law enforcement officers. Some of the other local law enforcement task forces that we've had, unfortunately, over time, they kind of get stood up and then, they just go away. Like, in the instance, because we're short on people, when I first came in, there was Mandanya. But, first thing that happened when I became chief and the other directors came in and sat down is, wait, I need to pull my guys back because I'm short on people, and we need to protect the borders at customs. I need my officers at the airport. I need them back at the port. So, we lost them back to their agency. And so, they've never been able to come back to the table and say, and then we talked about some of the issues that, with them coming over to the Guam Police Department and their jurisdiction, that became some of the issues that came up during some of these task forces, is that we have a port police officers way outside on Haasu Street executing a search warrant and legally doesn't have the jurisdiction to do so.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And, well, when you mentioned that a majority of them, the task force was pulled back because of lack of officers, so you were short-staffed. How is it that you see that this task force is not going to be in the same situation? Because I do know you're short-staffed.
And then that was one of the things I realized as, being, crowned the chair of MAULEG is, really what impact do I have on the other agencies if they have to provide me officers? But, it's not codified how many people, 2 from airport or 5 from customs. It's just that you have to participate. And if you look at the composition, if we add in under 94-106, we would have 8 officers if we get 1 from every agency. And that's just a minimum of 1. So 8 is a good start. I think it needs more. I remember, again, the days of Pedro's Plaza, the Special Investigation Section, which consists of narcotics, vice units, had almost upwards of 20 plus people. So ideally, that's where you need to be, because what goes hand in hand with narcotics is some of the vice activities, right? Gambling, maybe cockfighting, I don't know, prostitution, you never know, right? What are the vice activities that get involved in the drug trade world?
Well, you have quite a bit of amendments here, almost like a brand new bill, and it might take some time to reorganize. It might even be possible to have another public hearing once we incorporate all these new amendments, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be more other than what you brought up, because just the conversation alone has sparked other, concerns that we may have. With this task force, I guess it's able to collaborate with all the departments and agencies that are involved in this. But what exactly are this task force actually going to do? If you have an officer from each department and you have customs involved and are they going to physically go out and start hunting bad guys, or what exactly is this task force going to do?
Well, based on my reading of the MAULEG bill, it looks like our focus is going to be strictly and solely on interdicting drugs, making arrests, because we have a meth problem, right? And now we're starting to see the fentanyl problem.
What's the difference from what you do currently right now? Especially with your other task force in your agency that sit down and...
So I don't currently have a task force in the Guam Police Department. My officers are assigned to the federal task force, so they investigate federal crime. So
there is a federal agency that's doing exactly what this task force is going to be doing on a local level? Is that the difference?
That's how I envision it. That's the way I see this bill being written. So, I'll tell you, I've had a conversation with the Homeland Security investigation special agent in charge, or the deputy special agent in charge, and we kind of had this same vision. The federal task forces are all doing their own thing. They might be chasing the same person, I don't know, but they're all doing their own thing. They don't necessarily come together. They just kind of do their own investigation. DEA does their own thing, ATF does their own thing, HSI, and the HSI special agent goes, man, we need something that's centric to Guam, so that we can bring everybody together, so that we know that we're all chasing the same people, or that we're all investigating the same person, and there's one cohesive, synergized effort. So I think that's, and one thing we're just talking about locally, but really, in some states, federal agencies actually embed their federal agents in a local task force. I think Hawaii does that they would ask for an FBI agent to be embedded in their local Honolulu Police Department task force. So this is kind of a reverse way of thinking. Instead of us putting them, continuing to support what we have at the federal side, but also kind of reverse our thinking and say, hey, look, what can you now, we've always been supporting you, what can you do to support us?
I see. Is that part of the legislation to encourage the federal side to come and join this task force?
I think there was, I do remember
section in
reading
there?
something like that.
It talked about cost. I mean, you started going down a list, your wish list of everything under
Yeah.
the sky, you know, an office itself. The last thing we want to do is create legislation to let it fail. And my concern is sustainability on anything that we put together, especially if you're thinking about putting an office. That means there's got to be secretary there, there's got to be an administrator there, there's got to be everything under the sky. And unfortunately, the fiscal note does not provide anything other than, what is it, $500,000?
Yeah, and
That's very low considering
yeah,
what.
it is, and that's why I
Yeah.
wanted to make that as a note that, you know,
Very low.
when my ASO submitted the fiscal note,
Yeah.
she kind of saw it from her perspective,
Right.
the administrative support.
And you
But,
got to think about the sustainability, Chief. You know, it's not just creating something and then just, you know, just for the sake of, you know, pomp and circumstances, but it's about sustaining it and making it last. And where are we going to get the funding to do that? You know, that's one of my concerns. The other one is with regards to the Attorney General. I heard it, yeah, I had that question was answered already, but I really wish that we had the Attorney General here to actually, you know, say what I heard earlier about why he does not want to be here, but it would be good to hear why exactly and how we can assist his office to ensure that whoever you have captured or being able to prosecute somebody, that they're standing and ready to
So,
do
so
this.
I made that comment only because, you know, being a longtime investigator, I find that when we're working with one prosecutor, it kind of helps the process move along, as opposed to talking to, you know, prosecutor A today, prosecutor B next week. Having a dedicated prosecutor kind of helps move the process along because they understand the case, they understand the conspiracy, they understand the roles of the different people in the conspiracy.
Okay. Has there, Mr. Mazama from the Post, right? You're the director of the Post Commission?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And you had an opportunity to discuss, I mean, since you have at the table already all the, you know, public safety agencies at your table, has this bill been discussed with them?
Within the Post Commission, as far as the task force itself, though we have not met to discuss the MAULEG task force. We did meet
Okay.
with the governor at the public safety meeting, and it was discussed by the agencies, the post agencies, to include the other agencies like Department of Revenue and Taxation, Department of Public Health, Social Services. And if, based on my testimony, that's why I was recommending that those agencies not be included as the task force, but we can certainly bring them in once we feel the need to do so. Because if we're going to start the task force and it's law enforcement specifically towards the intent of the bill, we need to structure the task force to do that job. I do not believe in law enforcement by committee by having everybody else, all the other directors in. The other thing we face is availability for everybody to be at a meeting. We're talking 17 directors and chiefs. Everybody has their own schedule. And I know that once we start, our intent is to ensure that we get this off right. We decide on how to proceed forward, and we don't want to have to wait until, can we wait until the next week, or I'm busy this week. So reducing the number of committee members, reducing the membership, it's easier for us to say, okay, we need to meet, and there's only 7 of us. Really 7, 8, maybe 10 now. But when you have 17, 15, and then everybody else coming in, trying to get them all and getting their input is going to be difficult, Senator.
The Post also has, sometimes they have difficulty getting quorum, right? That's what I've heard in the past, about a year ago. I don't know, maybe it's fixed you guys were able to
Yes,
meet the quorum, but
we-
it's a difficulty, like you just said.
Yes,
you know.
prior to me coming on board, there was difficulty in establishing a quorum for the
Quorum.
meetings.
And
Since
that's
I've
a
been on
post.
board, we're meeting. In fact, we have a meeting scheduled for next week.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Fred, I wanted to ask you a couple questions. Okay. Do you know of any other types of, in any other jurisdiction? I know you're a former police officer and you've dealt with the Medallion Task Force as well as the chief and other things. Do you have anything to add as far as like other jurisdictions that may have something similar to this where the, and the ability to sustain it? Do you have anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Senator, for that answer. That question. And, previously, because I think the issue of the Attorney Generals came up, right? And today's current Attorney General in the past came up with a Government of Guam Corruption Task Force led by his office, but coordinated with the Guam Police Department because it's essential. That's why I agree with Chief Ignacio on the importance of what he brought up, having the AG committed to a narcotics prosecutor, someone just specialized for that. It's when you're doing narcotics investigations and prosecutions, and prosecutors are switching around, it's difficult to track all the different kind of cases, especially who is being prosecuted. And these criminals that are involved in drugs might not just be on-island criminals doing the drug trafficking, but off-island. That even makes it more complex because now it's a coordination with the federal government. So nationwide, several jurisdictions and districts, district attorneys can form a task force, and they invite officers from the police department or sheriffs, state police to go to that district attorney's office, and then it's the district attorney who will swear in those police officers and deputize them into the Attorney General's office as a special investigator for the Attorney General's office with the specific goal of targeting drug traffickers. So that's an example. It sometimes might not have to be organized at the police department, but it can organize from the office of the Attorney General. Now, the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Guam deals with the OCDF, the Organized Crime Drug Task Force, and they have meetings where they coordinate with the different agencies on specific targets. That's coordinated. So I'm just illustrating different examples that it can happen where the lead of a task force can originate from the prosecutor's office. Or in some cases, because law enforcement, the lead can happen at the main primary law enforcement, which is the Guam Police Department or the Sheriff's Department in that jurisdiction, or that LAPD or New York Police Department.
Thank you so much, Fred, for that insight. Other than that, of course, retention has been a big issue at the police department or any other agencies. But, the burnout, especially when it comes to police officers, that's a concern I have, and the safety of their well-being. It's important. These are the people who are protecting us. But I know there is a shortage, and I don't want to see us pull away from the work that you're doing right now. And so other than that, I'm hoping, Mr. Lozama, you can also reach out to the other post-commission and have a good discussion on this legislation, on what can make something like this work and be sustainable at the same time. Because I also know that you've been trying to get some money for that post-commission too, to be able to have your meetings. So I know you're still using GCC, the facility at GCC?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So that being said, Mr. Chair, I thank you for the opportunity to speak on this measure.
Cito Swasi, Senator Taitague. Senator Brown?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Certainly good afternoon to all of you that are here and providing testimony on this bill. I think the bottom line is really funding for the Guam Police Department to actually be able to execute what they used to be able to do. Because I understand the need for it. I think we all recognize the drug problem that we have on the island. but we're also taking existing resources from operations that are already stretched. And we're also taking, I mean, if you're taking from the Guam airport, you're taking from a different source of revenue. You're certainly taking from the port, you're taking from the ratepayers that are funding an officer that otherwise would be dedicated to performing their job at their respective location. Because I don't know, I don't see anyone's going to come here unless Airport Authority is going to tell us, you know, we have excess officers, or the Guam Port Authority that also has their mandate that they have to meet to operate. They do have a mandate, they have requirements of how many officers they have to have on duty doing very specific tasks 24 hours a day. So, I mean, I recognize the need for this. I think while there were issues with Mandania in terms of jurisdiction, when it existed, at least we were hearing things that were going on. We haven't heard as much on the local side. I mean, we hear the federal, we hear there's an investigation at DOC, you know, we hear that they find meth or whatever, and most recent, these pills that they found at the Guam post office. But we don't hear a lot at the local level, and yet we know drugs are a growing problem that really has seeped into pretty much every corner of Guam at every level, and as deep as it can go already. So I really want to know what your feedback is, because we don't have reps here from the Airport Authority. I mean, we do have you, Director Berdalia from DOC, or the port. How is this going to impact them? Because I was at the port when we had Mandania, and we had an officer that was taken. And at some point you go, how long do you keep them in those positions? Do you rotate them at some point? Because at some point when they're gone too long, they're not in touch with their operations anymore at the department or agency to which they originally came from. So I wanted to get feedback from any of you, what your thoughts are on that, because I realize we have limited resources, but we're trying to take those limited resources and dedicate them to the Guam Police Department, but we're also deficient in these areas. I mean, do you have spare officers at DOC?
Right now, we need to recruit more. We're still short in corrections officers. I just want to add that, you know, as I support Senator Dwayne's the intent of the bill, that we have some corrections officers that have been trained as reserve officers with the Guam Police Department. And some actually even joined the Park Reserve. So, you know, and the more that they get that under their belt of that knowledge and that experience working as a reserve officer for the Guam Police Department, like Captain Taitague right now, who commands the Aganya Detention Facility, you know, is a reserve officer. He was a reserve officer when I was chief of police and went through the training. So some of this is again, like I said, on the capacity of having to dedicate one officer from the Department of Corrections. We have an officer who's going to be dedicated to the Fusion Center, you know, for intelligence, and then also coordinating with our intelligence unit. Thankfully, they're doing good work because they came across the firearms information and interdicted that, at least, and got that. So it's critical too, again, as I said, with this initiative and this legislation, informing the task force, as we said, is that looking at the agency and what they can contribute, you know, as much as possible, but without impacting that own agency's operations like our own, because we have our own sort of situation and challenges that we have. But as I said, we're willing to support, you know, to look at this situation of importation of drugs and how it's poisoned our community, what we can do. And we have resources in corrections that can provide some intelligence, or if the task force needs some information on an inmate out there, dirty out there, dealing and as part of a drug trafficking organization, for sure there might be a 90% chance that we have the record of that inmate, and we will share that information with law enforcement. We do share it with federal law enforcement when they're on a case too, and that's why I said in my testimony, we're ready to contribute. But there are some points that, of course, I believe Chief Ignacio will understand, and the chairman and the vice chairman is MAULEG will understand about our limitations at the Department of Corrections.
So if I can ask you, Chief Ignacio, I mean, if you had additional funding, how would you prioritize it? Because, you know, the irony is, back in the day, let's go back 20, 30 years, when we had, you know, far smaller government, far less budget compared to the amounts we have today, you had far more police officers. And here you are, you know, fast forward to where we are today, you have less resources. How would you prioritize? Because I really think the real issue here is providing funding to the Guam Police Department. I think bringing everybody together is a good thing, especially all the intel and sharing of that information and facilitating towards a very focused agenda. I understand all that, but is that really what the real issue is you don't have the resources financially to actually operate these divisions that really used to go out and do this kind of work and be focused specifically, in this particular case, narcotics? What is your thoughts on that? Because maybe that's the real issue that we need to address, because taking from existing agencies, I don't mind the sharing, but what concerns me is we're taking resources that are already limited in other parts of the government that do provide a critical service, and we're certainly bringing them to the Guam Police Department, but we're not adding to the table. We're taking somewhere else, which means there's going to be deficiency, because like I said, I don't know the airport, but my familiarities with the port, we didn't have all these excess officers sitting around because we had mandates to meet, and we had to meet them 24 hours a day. So what's your thoughts on that?
So here's my thoughts. You're right. Had we, or if we had more officers, I think we would have a better, bigger, robust special investigation section, or the unit the section that does strictly narcotics investigations itself. But unfortunately, over time, I just had a conversation this morning with GCC. I said, you guys graduate all these people from the Criminal Justice Academy, but I can sit like this current training cycle. There's probably only 2 out of the whole 28 that are going to graduate that actually came from the GCC program. Most of my graduates, most of the recruits now in this training, high school graduates. Mm-hmm. There's really trying to attract them to the Guam Police Department has been, very, very difficult. But it's not just unique to the Guam Police Department nationwide. I had one of my staff, there was a group of my staff went to a training in Denver, Colorado, and right as you enter the expo hall for the exhibits, California Highway Patrol was advertising starting pay for a recruit $112,000. We're never going to get there, but that 25.59% is a good start. I think we've met with the different directors of law enforcement, and they all support the bill, and they all know that there's a commitment with MAULEG that you're going to provide. And like I said, 8 is a good start. So 8 plus we can, as the chief, I have the resources to pull my officers back from the task force, the federal task force. That's another 7 people. That's 15. If we have a major drug investigation. Then I have the special investigation. I have another 6 people there. That's 21 officers. 21 officers, when I start to fuse all these resources together when needed. And that's what happens right now. My special investigations section's officers, if there's a major federal case going on and they need additional support, whether DEA, my SIS officers go and get involved. So, yes, can we do it if we had more officers? Absolutely. But what do we do in the interim? And I think MAULEG helps. And really having all these other law enforcement agencies, we all have a vested interest to protect our community. So your one officer is your contribution to keeping Guam safe. So I think there's going to be a plus to their participation. And, hopefully we get to a better place, in 2-3 years from now, that we're all going to have enough officers to do our mandates, but also, fight crime, especially drugs.
How many officers do you have right now that are dedicated just specifically to drug interdiction?
6 at the Special Investigations Section and 7 at the task forces.
And you mentioned at the beginning of this current administration that the department directors pulled back their people. Is that the reason for the dismantling of Mandania? Because the administration made very public statements that they were simply going to create a new organization to essentially do the same job, and we have not seen or heard anything to that effect.
Yeah, so we took apart Mandania, but we kept, because Mandania just really is the Special Investigations Section. It just had a different name, a different flavor.
And so now you have how many officers? 6 that are
6.
dedicated to that?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I hope by mandating it, this is something that can be a little more permanized so that it's not something that just changes with the change of administration. Because publicly, there just seems like a very big gap. Publicly, how the people see, I mean, you know what investigations or information you have or what you're doing. The rest of us, unless something happens, of course, we're not going to see it till we read it in the news. And that, like I said, at the local level, we just don't hear as much about actions that are being taken. I mean, we hear about the police officer pulling somebody over, and in the course of, they have a broken tail light, your officer finds they have drugs in their vehicle. But, the bigger issues that are really what seems to us of the continued flow of drugs into this community, that it's permeated so far, and the prices continue to go down, it tells us that it's really permeated into the island in a way that I think none of us want to see, and it's here already. So it's a concern. I don't have any issues with the collective resources being brought together, but I think we need to acknowledge that it's at the expense of these existing operations. And unless they're also going to hire or have additional resources to hire more people to supplement, again, right now we're just taking existing resources away. But certainly for collective need, I think we all recognize. You mentioned the jurisdictional issue. How do you feel this will address that? With your airport police, your port police, your correction officers?
So like I described with the federal task force, when they go down there, they actually get deputized and sworn in. So that's the same concept we like to apply, so that they have the same powers as a Guam Police Department officer.
So you already have the ability legally to do that?
No, that's what we're trying to address in the MAULEG bill.
And you feel that this will help facilitate
Yes,
that, so there's
that's
no
definitely
jurisdiction. And this
needed.
is only specifically for drug-related investigations?
No, because if they're under the Guam Police Department, you
Then
get
they can
sworn
do
in.
any
So-
type of enforcement?
Yeah, but of course, the intent, we can't deviate from the intent of MAULEG because it's spelled out if the bill becomes law.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for providing your response to my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Senator Brown. Senator Dueñas, would you like to close on the bill?
Citos Masi, and I want to really thank the participation, first and foremost, of all of the affected agencies, and thank you, Chief, for describing your conversations with others. I want to thank my colleagues for some very well-placed comments. Once again, just to review in closing, Chief, I would hope that you and me, the executive branch of government, our governor, lieutenant governor, I would hope that our goal would be, we don't really ever want to have to implement MAULEG. Because if we had 364 officers on the beat on the street right now, you would already be detailing those individuals to that. But we know the realities. There's no need to point fingers. There's no need for blame. The bottom line is that you've said it time and time again, another bill coming up, another really good bill. You are bleeding officers because of recruitment and retention. And fundamentally, it's about pay and benefits. We know right now, Chief, you've said this 100 different times, you can go to the Navy base, you can go to the Air Force base, you can go to any one of these federal offices on Guam, and you see these former GPD officers with big smiles on their faces, nice car outside, and I'm sure their families well taken care of, because all of them are getting paid probably anywhere between 40 to 50 and 100% more than what they're getting paid, and as well as benefits. And so the bottom line is that we're going to do everything we can. We know you're trying your best, Chief. I know our chairman is trying like crazy as well. We get to 364 officers, we don't need MAULEG. But the good thing is, if we put it in place right now, and just like you said, Chief, even if you get one officer from each of these organizations, you have a tangible task force now that's well-oiled machine that can work with the other officers that are out there, and you have a method that becomes seamless in terms of your deputization, which I think is the cornerstone of this bill. The two fundamentals really are the manpower, the deputization, and then once again with the training. And I just think that it gives us that elasticity. It is law, but it has parameters, and so it releases itself based on manpower being at adequate levels. I really love, and I'm going to meet with the AG as soon as possible, I really love that idea, and I don't know that it would fit in this bill. I got to make sure it's germane. It might be a standalone, but I really love the idea of a prosecutor that's by law dedicated to the Attorney General's office that does nothing but works on drug crimes, and because even as we pray, that meth and other illicit drugs and opioids someday just plummet and go to a much lower level than we're dealing with right now. The fact is, we're always going to have those cases. And I think by, solid police work and solid prosecution, that's another deterrent besides just going out there. And one final note, I don't know if you're following this, Mr. Lezama, but nationally it's being recorded now. One of my colleagues said about the drug prices and how much is on the street. They're seeing supply and demand now where actually because of supply is what's causing a lot of the addiction. It's so easy to get. And it's so much out there that even casual users that probably would never even touch the stuff or think about it cross the path of illicit drugs because of the amount that's on the streets. And we know this drug in particular, one hit, most people are done. So the bottom line is everything we can do to try to get, at the lower level to the mid-level to the high level. I like the way you're saying that too, Chief, in terms of how that breaks down on prosecution, and those guys know what they're doing with law enforcement because they know what's going on. They just got to get out there and get it done, right? But the bottom line is that also the proliferation and the availability is really what's poisoning our people, because that availability is causing additional addictions. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I look forward to working with you. If it requires another public hearing, I'd be happy to do that. When we put this bill together, we'll circulate it as the chairman sees fit when we fix it, and we'll get your comments, and we'll see where we go from there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sijus Wasi, the Vice Chairman, Senator Dueñas. If there are no further questions or comments on this bill, we'll now proceed with hearing testimony on Bill number 281-37LS, introduced by myself, Senator Chris Barnett, an act to add a new Article 5 to Chapter 77, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to officer retention incentives for the Guam Police Department. And what the bill would do is it creates an incentive pay program for Guam police officers. And it's pretty simple. Police officers would be eligible for a bonus of $10,000 every 3 years, provided that the following criteria are met. The police officer's job performance is satisfactory. The police officer has no history of any disciplinary action involving police misconduct or violations of the laws of Guam, including but not limited to controlled substance abuse or alcohol abuse that may have been deferred or diverted. The police officer successfully completes the equivalent of not less than 3 continuing education units of post-secondary or professional education in law enforcement, criminal justice, or behavioral science. And that would be the equivalent of 10 credit hours per year. And the start date for accruing service time towards the 3-year bonus is effective on the date of enactment of this section. And any former Guam police officer that qualifies for reinstatement shall be eligible for a retention bonus 3 years following the date of reinstatement. And just kind of going back to the genesis of the recruitment and retention issues that have faced the Guam Police Department, I think it kind of all started when we gave an across-the-board increase to all law enforcement. And I mean no disrespect to any other law enforcement agency, but the problem was always that as Guam's premier law enforcement agency, the Guam Police Department, I think has the most responsibility, the most obligation, and the most amount of work out here, and they were always the lowest paid. So when we gave all of the law enforcement the increases that we did a few years back, what we didn't do was we didn't address the discrepancy and the disparity between the Guam Police Department and the rest of the law enforcement agencies. So essentially, everybody's pay was increased, but we didn't address that gap, which has continued to pose recruitment and retention problems for the Guam Police Department. Also to include some of the challenges, I mean, we've had the Guam Police Department leadership in here. Apparently people are having a hard time passing the entrance exam, but I believe that in concert with the 25.9% retention pay increase that was recently given to the Guam Police Department, I think that this pay incentive bonus program really is a significant piece of the puzzle when we talk about solutions, when we talk about making the Guam Police Department an attractive place to work, making it a more lucrative place for officers. And I think what seems to be the main problem with the police retention is this notion in the government of Guam that if GPD gets higher pay, then everybody else is also entitled to higher pay. And we've seen this even recently, I got comments from officers of the Guam Police Department who were talking about the certification pay that we just passed for the airport. You know, GPD just got the 25%, and then we gave the certification pay to the airport. And now the Department of Corrections has also approached the committee through various staff, and they're asking for a 25% retention pay. So in our efforts to address some of the law enforcement pay issues, I think where we have really fell short is addressing compensating Guam Police Department officers for the amount of work that they do on a regular basis every day. And this work includes securing death scenes such as suicides, accidents, homicides, being assaulted while effectuating arrests or securing a riot, dealing with drunk and belligerent persons, traffic pullovers, bar fights, criminal investigations, traffic accident investigations, traffic control, to, you know, just to really name a few, taking criminal complaints, security. So again, when we say Guam Police Department is the premier law enforcement agency of the island, I think that the compensation has to be at a level where it really reflects that premier status, because the situation I see is if we increase GPD's pay, if we provide the bonus, but then every other law enforcement agency also gets similar bonuses or similar increases in pay, then it's a runaway train and we're not going to address the problem. So I'm hoping for a favorable support of this bill and this effort from my colleagues, and I've just took a peek at the testimony from the chief, so that is encouraging. And we'll now take some testimony on Bill 281-37, starting with the Chief of Police, Stephen Ignacio. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Senator. Having good afternoon, Senators from the 37th Guam Legislature. I am Stephen C. Ignacio, and I'm here to provide testimony in support of Bill 281-37. Buenas and Afade. As the Chief of Police of the Guam Police Department, I am writing to express my strong support for Bill number 281-37, which authorizes the Guam Police Department to offer triennial retention bonuses to its uniformed police officers who meet specific criteria. This initiative is a crucial step toward retaining trained, experienced, and dedicated police personnel, thereby enhancing the overall safety and security of our community. The provision of a $10,000 retention bonus every 3 years is a significant incentive for police officers to continue their service, bringing stability and continuity to the Guam Police Department. Bill number 281-37 is a commendable effort to retain our police officers and maintain a high standard of public safety. I am confident that Bill number 281-37 will greatly benefit the recruitment and retention efforts of the Guam Police Department, and hereby reiterate my support for passing Bill number 281-37 into law, and respectfully encourage members of the 37th Guam Legislature to do the same. Thank you for allowing me to provide our comments on this bill and for your dedication to serving the best interests of our department.
Chief Ignacio. Mr. Lozama?
Afterday, Mr. Chairman and members on the Committee of Education, Public Safety, and Arts. My name is John Lozama. I'm the Executive Director for the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. I am in support of Bill 287-37 LS, which offers triennial retention bonuses to uniformed officers who fulfill the conditions of this article, and that local funds be appropriated to the Guam Police Department in order to do this. Moving into education, continuing education in law enforcement, criminal justice, and community relations. I can work with the Chief of Police and the training and staff to identify specific courses that the officers can be encouraged to take in order to fulfill their CEUs or the 10 credit hours. I know currently that the Training and Staff Division of the Guam Police Department has actually designated specific courses for each of their officers, and the officers are going into our learning management system under the Post Commission to take some of those courses. So that's encouraging. It's something that the department has already initiated. So moving forward and requiring them to complete their CUs or 10 credit hours is good. On a note, I will say that as the commission, As the Executive Director, my recommendation to the Post Commission, upcoming recommendation, is to look at the other agencies and see if there is in fact a retention issue that we need to address and bring that to the committee or to the governor's office. But we do need to look at everybody to be fair, and we will do so if approved by the Post Commission. This concludes my testimony, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lozama, for your testimony. I guess I did have just a couple of questions before I turn it over to my colleagues, and this is relative to the continuing education units. Chief, just first starting with you, do you believe that officers of the Guam Police Department, just, considering all the duties they perform day in and day out, do you think that there is time for them to pursue these continuing education units?
I believe so. I mean, if we're setting a benchmark of 3 years, 3 years to get 10 CEUs shouldn't be too difficult. I think in this profession, having CEUs is important. To Director Lizama's point from the Post Commission, thanks to the Post Commission and funding support from the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, we're finally able to get into a learning management system called Police One. And so there's a whole library, I think over 1,500 training videos, materials. I think if we're going to look at CEUs, we can probably coordinate with Police One and see if any of those classes or courses can be converted into CEUs, or maybe a block of instruction in particular, maybe a use of force training, maybe 4 or 5 videos constitutes one CEU. Because I think there's a wealth of resources there, everything from training videos to reading material that we can discuss with Police One to see if any of them have been converted or can be converted to CEUs. This may also allow the officers to think about, going back and furthering their education and, pursuing higher education. There's always, if you can't afford it, there's always the Doc Sanchez Scholarship Program,
But that's one thing that I wanted to be careful in doing with the bills. I didn't want to create an additional burden for the police officers who are already, carrying enough burden. So I wanted to really ensure that first, it wasn't cumbersome to get the required continuation education units, and then secondly, if there was an availability, because I know we had met about the Police One system, and so I didn't want to have to force officers of GPD to go enroll at UOG or GCC. So when we met on this Police One training module, it was very encouraging because it kind of sounds like, wham, bam, thank you, spam. That's it. Go watch the videos, get the continuing. So would that be available to officers of Guam Police Department at no? Is there a cost associated with this?
No, there's no cost to it. The commission, we actually paid for the subscription to Police One. In fact, we have a subscription for Fire Rescue One for the Guam Fire Department, aircraft rescue firefighters, the forestry. So we have enough memberships in Police One and in Fire Rescue One for all of our law enforcement personnel and peace officers. That is something I manage. I've actually gone into the training module for Police One, Fire Rescue One. There are existing CEU courses that they can take. You can start a course right now, and if you don't complete it, you can come back to it the next day until you complete it. So it's something that they have to devote some time to or time to do so, but because it's a triennial payout, they have the time to do it over a 3-year time frame. But it is available on Police One. There are courses also available on Fire Rescue One, should we explore the other agencies as well.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lozama. So just as defined in the bill, a continuing education unit, or CEU, is a nationally recognized standard for documenting successful completion of non-credit programs and courses intended to improve the knowledge and skills of working adults. A CEU represents 10 contact hours of experience in a structured continuing education experience, whether it be a class, seminar, retreat, practicum, etc., that is supervised by a qualified instructional provider. So as defined in the bill, if we're asking the police officers to get the continuing education credit, which represents 10 contact hours, and they're going to be required, I think, to do this again, I just want to make sure it's not going to be a burden, and they're going to have time to, meet up to 10 hours in a 12-month calendar year.
And if we're looking at the current training that the officers of the Guam Police Department go through, there is an opportunity to go through Police One and get the current training that they're doing certified as CEU credits and earn credits through the Police One. And that is something that my office and the training and staff development section at the Guam Police Department can work on. If you're looking at 10 credit hours for one CEU and you're telling that you're looking at over, know what the total number is, and if the concern is that, then what we can do, and if you allow us within the 10 days, we can look at what is the recommended number of CEUs or credit hours.
Sorry, Mr. Lozama, just according to the bill, again, the police officer successfully completes the equivalent of not less than 3 continuing education units of post-secondary professional education, law enforcement, criminal justice, or behavioral science. So they would have the 3-year period to complete those.
Right. So we can look at that as well, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for your supportive testimony, and I'll now turn it over to, I'll start with my Vice Chair, Senator Dueñas.
Mr. Chairman, and once again, thank you to Chief Ignacio as well as Director Lozama for their favorable testimony. This is pretty straightforward, Mr. Chairman. I think that with the support of, of the Chief and the Director and the willingness to ensure that the CEUs won't be an impediment, I definitely join you. In fact, Chief, I think at some point, I've received a list of recommendations in terms of recruitment and retention, particularly on the benefits side. But I don't want to go through that now. That's not why we're here. But I think that there are other things that we can do as well, to make sure that we can make it a lot more attractive for our officers to stay and also to join the force. But that's for another meeting. But I'd like to meet with you and the chairman and others, maybe the entire committee, to go over a list that was provided to me, particularly on the benefits side, that would really greatly enhance, retention and recruitment. So. But other than that, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a great bill. I'd like to co-sponsor it when it hits the floor. And thank you once again for your favorable testimony, gentlemen.
Vice Chair. Senator Taitague.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, good afternoon. Try not to keep you too much longer. Of course, the bill that has been presented, I had some concerns with it because, I'd like to see something done sooner than later. But I'm just going to read, for the record, the fiscal note that was given to us. Of course, it discussed the bill at the beginning, the proposed legislation's intent to authorize the Guam Police Department to offer triennial retention bonus to its uniformed police officers, providing that they meet specific eligibility criteria. Per comments provided by GPD, they estimate 60% of their current uniformed police officers, 257, which equates to 154 officers, may qualify for the incentive program established by the proposed legislation. Assuming the incentive program becomes implemented later this fiscal year, the cost impact is estimated at $1.54 million to take effect in the fourth quarter of FY 2027. The cost will likely increase at substantial fiscal years with the recruitment of additional uniformed personnel. It's a FY 2027, so yeah, it's like three years from now to move forward on this. I mean, I wish there was something we can do right now to keep the retention of your police officers without, those who want to retire early. And I know that we've introduced legislation that would actually give the ability for police officers to retire sooner than later and still be compensated for it. But, you know, I don't have any issues with this. I think it's a great idea. No complaints. But if there's anything we can do, you know, Chief, to start incentivizing or keeping our police officers, you know, on board sooner and providing some type of compensation sooner than later.
So we did the 25.59%,
Okay.
and really that was a substantial change to their base salary. And so, again, and I've talked about to this point, I've had already 3 officers come back. One's coming back from Camp Blas, one's coming back from another local agency, and another one that wanted to go active duty military changed his mind because they're now going to be making more in the Guam Police Department. Again, you know, I think we always focus on salaries, but I think one of the things we other need to look at too is some of the benefits, right? You know, I mean, they have to work until they're 62. In the federal law enforcement, you only work until the age of 57. It's actually a mandatory retirement at 57. So maybe that's some of the other benefits that we're talking about that we can look at.
Right.
You know, a mandatory retirement age with X amount of service. You know, because
good idea.
Something just a little bit more attractive because, you know, salaries, you know, are good, but it's kind of they kind of don't last forever. I mean,
Right.
we did 18% pay raise 3 years ago, but it still wasn't enough, right? They're still leaving. And so we revisited it with the Guam Police Department, and we said, you know, let's go after this 25%, similar to the Department of Corrections. And, you know, to our, you know, not to our surprise, but, you know, the recommendation was instead of an incentive pay, adjust the salary, the base salary of the Guam Police Department across the board for all uniform officers. So I think we're starting to see it. We'll see how it goes as we move forward. One of the other thing that might be in line with this, though, is in the next cycle, I already have a payback provision in place. And so I've had that vetted, and I've had conversations already with legal, and I've had conversations with Dr. Okada, Department of Labor, and Department of Administration. So we had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and so in the next police training cycle, we're going to be reporting out that each of those recruits understand that they are now committed to work for the Guam Police Department for 3 years, or there's a payback provision.
Wow, sounds very good. Anything else? Yeah. No. Okay.
No, ma'am.
Okay. You were holding that cough to the very end. Okay. Well, I greatly appreciate that new information, and I think it's a great idea. You know, I truly believe, you know, Chief, it's about a hand up, not a handout. And I think those officers who deserve a higher rate, a higher pay salary, should do it by, you know, providing more than just being able to pass the test, but, you know, the work ethics that they do, you know, the amount of arrests they make. I mean, I don't want to peg it so that they go out there just to make arrests so that they can meet a per diem or something like that, or
Right.
not a per diem, but I think it was a great idea, and thank you for sharing with that. I appreciate your time as well, and Mr. Chair, I think sounds good. We can continue to try and incentivize, you know, keeping our officers on the street, protecting our community. And this bill will actually help. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taitague. It kind of sounds like you want to be a co-sponsor.
Of course. We're the only ones that ever show
know, I
up for
got
these public hearings. I mean,
Thank you.
yeah, we
Thank
truly
you.
believe that they came here to bring their time. We should be here to give you our time as well and listen to what you have to say.
Si dos más, Senator Taitague. Senator Brown.
It's true, Mr. Chairman. We're always the ones left with you. Everybody else doesn't show up or they leave early. I certainly support this, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate your initiative in putting this forward, because that's been the challenge. Every time they do a salary increase for law enforcement, it goes across the board, and then we're still left in the same situation where and I think I certainly am of the opinion the Guam Police Department, because of their mandates, have a much broader responsibility and a larger responsibility than any of the other law enforcement, simply because they have the other entities all have specific jurisdictions that they're responsible for. Guam Police Department is island-wide, and then when they need help, they'll call on you. So I certainly support the initiative here to provide this incentive program that hopefully will keep and retain officers. But I did want to ask you, Chief, what has kept you here? I know you're way past your 20 years, right? I wish we could say it's only been 20 years, but you know, even myself, I go, oh, it's 30, oh, it's getting closer to 40 now. What has made you stay? I mean, in spite of, you know, not having incentives and these other benefits, why have you stayed as long as you have in the Guam Police Department? Because everybody talks about money, and I know in your case that can't be because you've been in there many years without all these other incentives.
Ma'am, if you're proposing a pay raise for the chief of police, I support. But, you know, all kidding aside, you know, I've asked myself that because I've looked at my colleagues, the command staff officers that when I was a captain I used to work for. And let me tell you, I looked at a captain, when I was a captain, you know, we were making the same hourly rate. And I kind of, you know, everything has to, when it comes to money and it comes to raises, you know, it's got to cross my desk. So, you know, I kind of take my time when I see a captain's personnel action, a GG1 cross my desk. And I start, you know, doing the calculation. I'm like, ouch. When they did the 18% 3 years ago, I lost out on probably 30 to 40,000 plus the COVID pay. As I did the calculation for this 25.59% base salary increase, the chief of police, when I walk into the command staff meeting, I always remind them, don't forget, I'm the least paid employee in this room because the captain that's my counterpart in salary is now making over $70,000 more than I do. And, well, you know, why do I do it? It's not insanity, it's just, you know, I'm invested in our island, keeping it safe. And I like to lead so that I can do better, you know. And, you know, sometimes, you know, the officers, you know, I need this, I needed it yesterday. We needed cars yesterday. And, you know, I try and temper that down with, you got to understand, there's procurement, there's processes, funding, you know, there's a whole myriad of challenges. But I love what I do. And, you know, I love serving the governor and lieutenant governor in this capacity. But more importantly, the people of Guam. It's crossed my mind many times that you got to be crazy to continue to sit in this chair. I mean, I've looked at the colonel and the major salary, and they're probably clearing easily $80,000 to $100,000 more than I do. And you know, my family's asked me the same thing too. Why are you still there? I love what I do, you know, and I want to, you know, make sure that I leave this place better than when I came in, and you know, just because every other chief has, you know, left their mark on the department. You know, I've worked under good leaders, great leaders, and you know, you just want to make sure that you do your part. One, to keep the island safe, do better for your employees, and you know, leave the place better than when you first came in. And you know, things like our radio communication systems, building the Eastern Precinct, the evidence control section in GIGO. I don't want to say too much right now, but I've actually had a meeting this morning about something that we've talked about over the past 3 to 4 years, is this police-centric, like our JROTC program. I had a very positive meeting this morning with GCC and Tizanay and myself, and we're going to be hitting the ground running, trying to get this kicked off in the next school year, 25-26. So, you know, you just want to continue to move on. You know, I always joke to Director Byrne, I work holidays, I work typhoons, but because I'm a unclassified director, cabinet member, I don't get clothing allowance, but I don't know how many suits I've bought for different black tie, business, you know, it's just, you know, police uniforms, you know, because, you know, we want to make sure that I represent the department well. But yeah, I love what I do, and thank you very much for asking. You're the first one that's asked me, why do I stay, you know, here? Well, I definitely will not ask, you know, for a raise because, you know, I work alongside the governor as a cabinet member, and I'm just dedicated to what I want to do for the island.
Well, I certainly appreciate you sharing that insight with us, because I'm sure for those of you that, and in your case, Chief, that you've served these many years, there has to be more to keep you there, and I appreciate you giving us some insight, because everyone thinks it's about the money, and yes, money's important. We all have obligations that we need to take care of, but there's got to be something that motivates you more to do the work that you do. So I certainly appreciate your insight. I'm sure our people do. Thanks for providing that. And with that, Mr. Chair, I don't have any questions. I think you certainly have our support for this bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Brown. And thank you, Senator Taitague, also for your comments. I think just in closing, are there any other comments or questions? I think just in closing, Mr. Lozama, you did make me a little bit nervous when you talked about looking at all the other law enforcement and looking at, whether or not they have the retention issues and whether or not they would also require some kind of similar pay incentive. I think the issue is, as a government, we have to agree that the Guam Police Department is going to be the premier law enforcement agency and have to be compensated in that way, just due to the immense amount of responsibility that they have. And again, this is we're a couple weeks away from the election, and I'm talking about comparing law enforcement, but I just got to say, GPD, when you look at the mandates that they're tasked with executing, I think that it's clear that they're dealing with a lot more. So I'm not sure if the solution is for us as a government to agree that GPD deserves to be compensated as the premier law enforcement agency, or if it's something like we, render everyone whole by paying them all the same, and then, supplement that pay with whatever incentive or specialized pay is. But I just worry about those efforts, because what this bill is intending to do and what the 25.9% retention pay is intending to do is to really compensate GPD at a level where the amount of work they do is reflected in the amount of pay and in incentive bonuses that they receive, and it's reflected in the difference in their pay versus the other law enforcement agencies. And I think once we kind of agree, or in whatever way move forward with that kind of on our mindset, I think that we could see that day where we don't have. And we've talked about retention and recruitment. There's so many ideas that float around. We've heard things just from some of the men and women in uniform. Hey, make everyone do 4 years of GPD before they can go to airport police or before they can go to port police. So I'm always open to any suggestions and ideas. But again, the intent for me with this bill is to address the discrepancy that the Guam Police Department has, because we've seen the impact of it. We've seen other law enforcement agencies get these increases and whatever kind of specialized or certification pay, but meanwhile the Guam Police Department has remained at the bottom of the heap because we didn't address the difference between a GPD and whatever other type of law enforcement agency. And so again, that's the intent of the bill, and that's always going to be my intent as the chair of public safety, is to really give GPD that Guam Premier Department treatment. So thank you again for your input and testimony on the bill, and if there is any other testimony, you can provide that to the committee. If there are no further questions or comments, we'll now proceed with the hearing testimony on Bill number 293-37 COR, introduced by Senator Telo Taitague, Senator Joanne Brown, and myself, and Senators Frank Blas Jr., Senator Joseph Agustin, Senator Chris Dueñas, and Senator Jesse Lujan, which is an act to add a new section 58.61 to Chapter 58 of Title IX of the Guam Code Annotated relative to the use of alcohol and controlled substances within detention and correctional facilities. I'd like to go now to the bill's main sponsor, Senator Telo Taitague, if you'd like to open on the bill. Sidos Masi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for hearing this, this measure. It was in this hall not too long ago during a previous hearing that we were informed that there were currently is no penalty for prison inmates or detainees being under the influence of illegal substance. We were told that although officials have strong reason to believe that an inmate is under the influence, they cannot charge the inmate with a crime. Prisoners feel free to use illegal substance as long as they don't have them on them. We know that illegal drugs make their way into the prison. What we need to is to disincentivize against drugs and alcohol use in the prisons. This bill aims to provide this disincentive by making it a crime for inmates to be under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Prisoners will think twice before abusing drugs if it means having time added to their prison sentence. The bill aims not only to deter drugs and alcohol use within the prison, but also to disrupt the cycle of substance abuse that undermines rehabilitation efforts. Additionally, it should further bolster the effectiveness of our penal system and add in mitigating the immediate threat to our correction officers who face these dangers on a daily basis. So I thank you, Mr. Chair, for holding the hearing on this bill, and thank you again to all who will offer testimony, and looking forward to the conversation to strengthen this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Taitague. The committee also received favorable testimony in support of the bill from Carissa Pangolina, the acting director of JIBWIC. They asked actually that the bill be amended to add a section that reads, quote, unless prescribed by a licensed physician and taken as instructed by that physician, at the end of subsection A of section 58.61. The committee also did receive a fiscal note from BBMR, which I'll go ahead and read a little bit of here. The proposed legislation would make it unlawful for a detainee or prisoner to use or be under the influence of alcohol and a controlled substance within a detention or correctional facility operated by the Guam Police Department or the Department of Corrections. A detainee or prisoner who violates the law shall be guilty of a misdemeanor and upon conviction shall be punished by a sentence of imprisonment for a period of no less than 30 days or by a fine of no less than $500 or by both such minimum sentence of imprisonment and fine. Such sentence shall be in addition to the sentence for which the prisoner is incarcerated. Although the bill appears to be administrative in nature, the Bureau is of the opinion that there will be a potential impact to DOC should a detainee or a prisoner be found guilty and the length of their current sentence for which they are incarcerated is then extended by an additional 30 days. These are incarceration-specific costs, such as cost of meals, health care, clothing, rehabilitative services, and other associated costs and services for imprisonment. As these costs are dependent upon the number of detainees or prisoners to be found guilty of such violation, the bill's approximate fiscal impact to the DOC cannot be determined at this time. And we'll now recognize those who have showed up to provide testimony on Bill 293, and we'll go ahead and start with the Department of Corrections Director, Fred Berdalio.
Thank you, Senator Barnett. My name is Fred Berdalio, Jr., Director of Department of Corrections, and I'm here to support Bill 293-37, and this is my written testimony. Buenas tardes, Senator Chris Barnett, Chairperson, Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts, members of the 30th Guam Legislature, Senator Joanne Brown, Senator Taitague. I'm providing this written testimony in support of the above aforementioned proposed legislative bill 293-37. Inmates that are incarcerated at the Department of Corrections on pretrial status or serving their prison confinement sentence upon conviction are required to comply with the rules and regulations of the prison and laws of Guam. The incidences of promotion of contraband as a crime that has been reported by our agency to the Guam Police Department has led to investigations which has correlated with observations among prison staff from the security force, behavioral medical officials, that inmates were found to be under the influence of alcohol or controlled substances. Any person that obtains smuggled contraband, either alcohol or controlled substance, into our prison facilities becomes under the influence through use or consumption, poses a security threat to our agency staff and inmates. There have been incidents reported to searches for suspected contraband hidden within the prison facilities without success of finding the contraband. Yet an inmate within the area of the search displayed behavioral signs of being under the influence of alcohol or a controlled substance. Our agency would be limited to the use of disciplinary administrative actions for an inmate found to be under the influence of alcohol or controlled substance. This proposed legislation, if passed into law, may provide deterrence among the inmates and staff at the prison facilities from refraining from promotion of prison contraband, and more importantly, using and consuming the contraband that would be a result in criminal prosecution and extended time of incarceration upon conviction. Thank you. And I'll wait for any questions from the senators.
Susan Smasi, Director Berdalio, Chief Ignacio.
Have a good afternoon, Senators. I'm Stephen C. Ignacio, Chief of Police of the Guam Police Department. I'm here to provide written testimony in support of Bill number 293-37. Buenas Donofady, as the Chief of the Guam Police Department, I'm writing to express my support for Bill 293-37, which addresses the use of alcohol and controlled substances within detention and correctional facilities. However, I would like to suggest an amendment to improve the bill's effectiveness and fairness. The bill states that it is unlawful for a detainee or prisoner within a detention or correctional facility operated by the Guam Police Department or the Department of Corrections to use or be under the influence of alcohol or a controlled substance. While I fully support the intent behind the legislation, I recommend to remove the following phrase, the Guam Police Department or, from this proposed section. The Guam Police Department is responsible for arresting individuals who may already be under the influence of alcohol or controlled substances at the time of their detention. Including GPD in this context may lead to unintended consequences, as detaining individuals who are already under the influence could be construed as a form of entrapment. The primary concern should be to ensure that detainees and convicts do not have access to these substances while in custody, particularly within the Department of Corrections. If a detainee or convict at the DOC is found to be under the influence of a controlled substance or alcohol that was facilitated during their incarceration, the provisions of this bill are entirely appropriate and necessary. This measure will help maintain order and safety within correctional facilities and support the rehabilitation process for inmates. I believe this amendment will clarify the bill's intent and ensure that its enforcement is both fair and effective. Thank you.
Susan Smasi, Chief Ignacio. I just had a couple questions. Director Berdalio, you know, there's a lot of, there are a few items that are not allowed in the Department of Corrections, right? Prohibited.
That's correct, yes.
Right. Would you be supportive or to add these types of things to this bill? For example, you know, cell phones, any other type of items that are deemed contraband? Guns? Sorry. You know, 100 grams of meth, type of thing. Would you be supportive of adding anything deemed contraband by DOC into the language of the bill?
Well, you know, as reading in the intent of the bill, because it's specifically the scope of the legislation specifically looks at the challenges of inmates that are looking like they're under the influence of alcohol or drugs. It starts to become broad if you would add that they used the firearm while inside the prison, or they used the shank on the prison.
I think you might have suggested that in a separate bill in a previous hearing, so thank you for that, sir.
So I said that, you know, our officers, you know, when they see any kind of contraband caught after visiting or whatever, you know, among an inmate, they will properly write the reports for the disciplinary action of that inmate. But if it's something of contraband, like a deadly weapon, they'll call the Guam Police Department, get a case number, the Attorney General's office are in that position to prosecute. This kind of, this legislation, of course, doesn't look at it being contraband that they're on, but just the influence, them displaying influence, and then of course, them being subjected to a drug test to confirm that they're under an influence. Similar to almost how like DUI, you know, when they're pulled over and then they found out they're under influence while they were operating a vehicle.
Are your officers trained to recognize signs of, you know, individuals being under the influence?
I believe our officers receive training as corrections officers. Part of their academy training to look at signs of individuals who display that they're intoxicated or under some kind of influence, and they get additional training from our partners from behavioral health to enhance their skills when they're dealing with the custody of the confinees that they're securing inside our facility.
My last comment, and I'm not sure if we're going to run into any like constitutionality issues, but does 30 days mean anything to someone who's serving, you know, a sentence of multiple years? It almost seems like the penalty maybe should, and we'll discuss it with the author, maybe increased, you know, given that the circumstances that you're in a prison.
I believe that with the current legislation, how it's being proposed with just either the inmate and also circumstances, what is their status? If it's an inmate on pre-trial that we're confining and is looking forward to show his lawyer that he's innocent, you know, and should be released soon, but all of a sudden it's under influence, then of course that negates the fact that he's not doing anything of any kind of criminality right now, and that's going to add another charge again, and his, of course, that's the kind of conversation it's going to have from there is, man, you know, well, I was working to get you released, but now you're being charged for a crime inside there and you're being used. This is all hypothetical again, right? And now with an individual who's already serving a sentence, right, and wants to get to the point of being eligible for parole to be released on good behavior, this, of course, kind of crime, but they're being charged is going to negate their eligibility for parole to get out on good behavior because, of course, not only did they violate a rule now, but they violated a law now that would have been enacted.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I just was wondering, thinking out loud, you know, should the penalty be stiffer? We give you 30 days, but you're going to do 20 in the hole.
Well, again, as I said, you know, the disciplinary action of what happens to them is if they were out on population, you know, minimum in, they're brought back into administrative segregation, and that's highly max custody, and of course their privileges are now reduced now in terms of their time of going out. So that's a penalty administratively. But just knowing that the Guam Attorney General is going to charge them for use, whether it be 30 days or even a fine, is just adding on to you were, again, looking real good to get parole or, you know, be released early if it was a pretrial confining, but now all of a sudden this charge, it may be used as leverage because sometimes what happens in these kind of cases, the inmate might be willing to disclose who sourced them, who provided them that drug that got them influence, so they can say, maybe we can make a deal here. Don't charge me for that, but I can give up my source, who brought in the contraband. And that can have real benefits in terms of the deterrence factor, but at the same time, what could possibly we could address in these challenges of contraband inside our facility, the drugs.
Thank you, Director Berdalio. Senator Taitague.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It sounds like you'd like to be a co-sponsor. Oh, wait. You are a co-sponsor.
Already.
No, I agree with, first, thank you so much for your testimony, and thank you for the amendment. It makes total sense, Chief, you know, because you're picking them up, putting them in the can for being drunk or under the influence. So no, it totally makes sense. So we will make that amendment, you know. And I do believe that, you know, 30 days, when I first started doing this at 30 days was something, I think a recommendation from an individual 30 days, but I have no problem, unless you can give me reason not to increase it from 3 months to 6 months and give the discretion up to the judicial branch when going in for prosecution, that, you know, because this could be this person's second time or third time offense, you know, that it should be increased as it gets, you know. So what do you think about that, Fred?
Senator, that sounds feasible too. You know, the whole, I think, ultimate goal here is just as had been discussed in the hearing that I once said, you have drug-free school zones, right? Our prison should be a drug-free prison zone too, similar to that kind of thing. And a lot of our behavioral and health staff work very hard, diligently to help these inmates, right, beat their addiction. And then all of a sudden, I'll get the call from Therese when she used to be at behavior. How did this inmate come up positive with you know, crystal meth or, you know, illegal substances? And we work so hard, right? And it's just not giving up, but going back to the drawing board. But at the same time, hey, this is going to be a different game changer in terms of now the inmate not only faces disciplinary action, but a criminal charge against him. And hopefully we'll see how that works out. You know, but it is feasible.
Absolutely. I mean, I know some families who've, it's unfortunate, many of us who've had family members involved who is addicted, that sometimes family members are just hoping that they get caught so they can be put in jail, so that was the rehabilitation right there, so they can get off drugs. But yeah, if they're doing it in the prison, it defeats the purpose.
And Senator, I just wanted to add, our staff are aware that if this becomes law, even them could be subject to prosecution if any staff member in Department of Corrections is under the influence of any alcohol or illegal substance while they're employed inside the prison facilities.
Well, yeah, and that's a bigger egg to fry. you get officers who are in doing drugs, or even worse, providing the drugs, like you said earlier, that this is a great incentive for them to give up who gave them the drugs, who brought them in. So I would like to look into that, maybe 3 months to 6 months, and give the discretion up to the judge. Also, have you had an opportunity, Fred, to talk to the Attorney General? Because it's one thing to be able to have your officers detect somebody who's under the influence, but the next step is to provide the evidence or the process to ensure that the Attorney General has everything it takes to convict the individual.
Senator, I haven't had any in-depth discussion with the Attorney Generals, but I believe I did mention to him about the potential legislation on inmates in terms of use of drugs, and it coincidentally, because you know people heard when we were in that lockdown, you know, of a potential firearm being smuggled into the facility. Part of our investigation of that, and a lot of it's ongoing too, is that we drug test our employees, we drug test the inmates in that section of that post 5 where the incident of the smuggled firearms, and 2 inmates refused to be drug tested, right? So that also shows that there's some suspicion why they refuse. One of the other inmates that's housed in post 5 tested positive THC, right? So it's an indication too, you know, again, the contraband being in there, drug contraband, right? And now that inmate that tested positive with THC in that post 5 is facing disciplinary action. But if this was already a law, he'd be facing criminal charges, and maybe would be a material witness to the AG to make some sort of like deal and find out who is responsible for even the more serious portions, smuggling in a firearm into our facility.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing the conversation you have with the Attorney General, and maybe actually we can just have a meeting together with the chair, myself, the Attorney General, and of course Joanne always comes along, so, and we're 2 peas in a pod, but to have this conversation with the Attorney General, just to make sure that our T's are crossed and I's are dotted, and that we can get a positive conviction and not something thrown out because we lacked information or we lacked certain process. So again, I appreciate it, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Taitague, Senator Brown.
Thank you again. I just wanted to ask, do you have your contract in place so you can do your drug testing? I mean, you need your evidence, right? They need to be able to determine if they have alcohol in their system or they have drugs that they're not supposed to have. Do you have your contract in place to do that for your inmates?
Yes, I believe we have the resources to go ahead and drug test the inmates in our facility.
And what steps have you put in place to address the flow of these drugs and these other contrabands that are not allowed into the prison, because this is an old story. I think we've all heard it for many years, and you know, like I said, I'm waiting for the next DOC guard to be identified that's helping bring in you know, this contraband into the prison. That's the same old story. It's just a different person, but the same old scenario. So where are we with that? And are you still, I assume you're still
Well, we're
coming across
we're-
this,
our-
entering into the Department of Corrections? So what have you increased
Yeah,
in inspections of what's going into the prison?
Yeah, we'll do, there's our warden is back from vacation. The acting warden did a real good job, Major Helen Lazama, during the lockdown, and really acting on the intelligence information that we received for that firearms. But we've been really adamant on doing random searches in the different facilities, and that's what it's really about, unannounced searches of the different housing areas to determine, and then also at the same time, our intelligence unit, I don't want to disclose some of the methodology of what they're doing,
Sure.
because there's some ways and methods they use to working on some information, what's happening inside each of the housing and who would provide that information and then act on it, and that's how they key in those searches. We also, of course, it's already our standard that every time visitation is finished, that they'll do searches of all the inmates that came back from visitation. There was even one recently after the visitation, they found the drug inside his mouth. So, you know, and it was caught. And that's, you know, being very, very meticulous and very aggressive in ensuring that the inmates know that we're going to be very aggressive and stepping them aside and searching them after every visitation hours. And even when they come back from their working, you know, outside work credit activities. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, because we just recently had inmates eligible to work out in an outside employment, and 3 of those inmates were eligible for that. They were screened. 2 of them, when they came back, we drug tested them just to make sure they're clean. Those 2 positive and crystal meth, they're removed from the program. And unlike maybe what could happen in previous times, you know, the inmates it circulates, will I cancel or close the entire program? No, just those 2 inmates are going to be facing the disciplinary action for using while they were in this outside employment program. And they just start all over again, back to square one in their classification. But, and that's just some of the things that we're doing right now, and really beefing up, you know, trying to improve some of our things, and with our procurement, especially with the camera systems that we really need to know what's happening in these areas, and the lighting and watching what's happening. There's some open cases that Guam Police Department have that's promising, you know, and it's related to, you know, a vehicle coming in and contraband being thrown over our fence, and some of the other contraband cases. And I believe even the feds, with the adoption of the one with the large amount of meth, that's an ongoing thing with them, and they look at what's happening too. So sometimes the federal law enforcement have an interest to see what can happen over here in our facility, and we'll certainly use some of their resources too.
How about any random inspections of your officers when they come to work? Do you have anything scheduled for that?
Well, what we have actually, there's going to be again a random drug testing again for our employees. I believe we budgeted that for the fiscal year, and then the warden has every now and then had some searches of bags and employees, right? So we're screening them as they're coming in, and they're being searched as they come up into the control room. Even myself, I'm not exempted to that, because I went into the control center and they just said, Director, step over here and put everything out of your pockets, and they even searched me too, which is, you know, kudos to the staff that are very professional doing their duties.
Well, we certainly appreciate those efforts. I mean, it's unfortunate because we're assuming when people are convicted and they're sent to prison to serve time, that's what we expect them to do. I know that's not a popular thing to say now, because we're supposed to be a lot more caring and compassionate. But, you know, when these crimes are committed against our community, I just think, you know, you do the crime, you pay the time. It's pretty basic. And I just want to make sure they're not violating the laws while they're in there. And certainly we did not realize until this issue came up that, you know, there's no way of doing any penalty to them when they're already in prison. because there was nothing in place to address that. So we certainly hope that this fills that gap. So thank you. Thank you to both of you for your testimony and coming down this afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Brown. Senator Taitague, would you like to close on the bill?
Just thank you, everyone. I know you're hungry. So I have to go to get to dinner on time, but really appreciate it. And again, looking forward to the conversation we have with the Attorney General, Mr. Chair, if we can have a meeting scheduled with him and get this out right away, because I know there's going to be another legislation coming up with regards to weapons and coming up, so take other contraband.
Right on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Taitague, for the heads up. All right. If there are no further questions or comments, this concludes this afternoon's public hearing on the three bills. The Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts will continue to accept written statements on today's hearing within 10 business days from today, which may be mailed to my office on the second floor of the Guam Congress Building at 163 Challenge Santa Papa, Nagatnya. You may also send your testimony to us at malafunction@guamlegislature.org. That's MALAFUNKSHUN at guamlegislature.org. I'd like to again thank you all for your participation. This public hearing is adjourned at 4:40 Chamorro Standard Time. Guahusi Senador Chris Malafunction Barnett. Hasta. Adios.